Good evening. Welcome to the Schuylkill Township Transportation Impact Fee Advisory Committee meeting, status meeting number 4, July 22nd, 2021. Before we get into the agenda, I'm going to just hand it over to EJ to go over some of these, some of the meeting logistics.
Thanks, Jason. So this is just for anyone who's attending remotely through Zoom. There will be an opportunity for public comment and or questions on the land use assumptions report, which is the second item on the agenda. So once we get to that, we're actually going to open a public hearing. There will be a presentation, and then we will accept public comments or questions. So through the Zoom meeting, you will have the option of either typing in your comment or question using the chat feature, or if you unmute yourself, you can actually address the Impact Fee Committee and provide your comments or questions verbally. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, EJ. So I'll move on to item number 1, approval of the April 22nd, 2020 status meeting number 3 summary. Was it 2021 or?
Should be 2021.
Should be 2021.
Yeah.
Meeting 3 summary. Does anybody have any comments or corrections from those meeting minutes, other than maybe the date?
No.
No? Okay. If there's no comments or corrections, anyone make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the April 22nd meeting minutes.
Second.
Second. Okay. The meeting minutes from April 22nd, 2021 are approved.
And we'll circulate a final draft to the committee after this evening.
Okay. All right. So that's go on to the next agenda item here is the draft land use assumptions report, the public hearing portion. And it's going to be presented by the Brandywine Conservancy, and I think EJ is going to maybe step in and say a thing or two.
Yeah, so the public hearing is now open, and just a couple of administrative items to mention for the record. Per the MPC requirements, this public hearing has been duly advertised twice in the Pottstown Mercury on July 6th, 2021 and July 13th, 21. And proof of publication are available for inspection at the Township Building. Additionally, per the MPC requirements for the impact fee study, notices along with the draft of the land use assumptions report were sent to the Chester County Planning Commission, Montgomery County Planning Commission, Phoenixville Area School District, and all contiguous municipalities to Schuylkill Township for a minimum of a 30-day comment period. And copies of those notice letters are also available for inspection. And now, I think I'll turn it over to Rob for a presentation on the land use assumptions report.
Okay, thanks EJ. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for having me here this evening to give a brief overview of the land assumptions report. I think EJ already mentioned my name's Rob Daniels. I'm a senior land use planner with the Brandywine Conservancy down in Chadds Township. I have a brief presentation to go over the draft land use assumptions report, and I'm happy to take questions or comments at the end. So next slide, EJ. Just quickly, a summary of the process for this land use assumptions report. Essentially has 3 elements to it. I should note that this is the first step of the adoption of a transportation impact fee ordinance under Act 209 of the Municipal Planning Code, which will continue upon adoption of this land use assumptions report. But this report itself defines a proposed transportation service area within the Schuylkill Township. It reviews land use patterns and population trends for the municipality over the last couple of decades. And we also, the primary purpose of this is to perform a build-out analysis which looks at expected development in Schuylkill Township over the next 10 years to help inform that transportation impact fee study, which will continue on after this report is completed. So next slide, EJ. The Act 209 for the land use assumptions report allows a transportation service area of up to 7 contiguous square miles within Schuylkill Township. The map that you can now see on the screen is the proposed transportation service area for the township. In the the lighter green color, it removes water bodies in the township, protected lands, residential areas that are associated with homeowner associations, floodplains, and the land that's surrounding the reservoir that's owned by the water company. This results in a transportation service area of 6.67 square miles within the township, so under the 7 square miles limit for the Act 209. Next slide, EJ. This map here shows land use within the TSA in Schuylkill Township. The lighter blue color is residential, so the TSA is certainly dominated by both residential and some woodland and agricultural land uses. Other land uses of significance are recreational lands and those associated with community services such as schools, churches, etc. As with most Chester County municipalities, the dominant changes in land use over the last 30 years or so have been associated with the increase in residential land uses, generally at the loss of both agricultural and natural areas. Since 1995, which I should mention, this data here is from 2015 from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. From data that they have also collected in 1995, residential land use in the Schuylkill Township covered around a third of the township. It's now, in 2015, up to around 44% of land use within the township. Much of that increase occurred prior to the Great Recession of 2008, with less increase in residential development since 2000, or generally around the 2008 period. Next slide, EJ. Oops. Second, I said we would look at population changes within Schuylkill Township. This slide here has both census data from 2000 and 2010 in the top left-hand corner for Schuylkill as well as the surrounding municipalities and Chester County as a whole. As you can see from the percent change, besides Charlestown Township, Schuylkill has seen the greatest percentage in population change amongst its neighbors between 2000 and 2010, when certainly greater than what was seen as the county, within the county as a whole. Since 2010, population growth has slowed, partly as a reflection of that, the Great Recession and the downturn in housing unit developments. But the second table in the bottom left-hand corner shows population projections for the next 30 years that were developed also by the Delaware Regional Planning Commission. It suggests that Schuylkill will continue to see some growth for the next 10 to 15 years, but certainly a lot lower than what we've seen in historic periods. And then after about 2030, 2035, while continuing to grow at a lesser level than what we've seen in the past. I think some of this future population or anticipated population projections is attributed to Schuylkill Township nearing build-out capacity for residential development in the township. But like I said, there is still anticipated some population growth. Unfortunately, as everybody is probably aware, we have the 2020 census. Unfortunately, 2020 census data is not yet available at township level, so we weren't able to incorporate that into this study. Next slide, EJ. So the crux of this report really gets to the build-out analysis for Schuylkill Township over the next 10 or so years. And so what is a build-out analysis? Essentially what that is to try to calculate the potential for residential and non-residential development and redevelopment within that defined transportation service area, utilizing the existing zoning that's on record here in the township. It does not necessarily consider what development people may like to see, but the development is permitted through current zoning. Through this process, we also take into consideration environmental protections that are embedded in the zoning ordinance and a whole host of other assumptions, which I will get to at the next slide. But it's essentially a GIS mapping analysis and exercise that allows us to predict what kind of residential and commercial development we might see on certain vacant lots or ones that may be open for redevelopment. Next slide, EJ. So in performing this build-out analysis, there's a lot of assumptions and a sort of a methodological approach that we take. Once defining that transportation service area, even though we've already removed protected open space within, outside of that transportation service area. We then also remove it from within, because obviously that is protected from development in perpetuity. We also remove any approved development prior to the beginning of this transportation impact fee analysis. We try to identify potential redevelopment opportunities within the township, and certainly the municipal staff have been helpful on that front. We also then undertake an aerial inspection of vacant and undeveloped lots within the municipality, within that transportation service area. And like I've already mentioned, we consider natural resource protections where applicable within the various zoning districts. We also subtract 10% of any area within certain parcels for development and redevelopment for the potential of road right-of-ways in residential development. And also it assumes by right uses within the various zoning districts. We do not consider anything that might be permitted under conditional use in this process. Where applicable, we have taken into account the conservation overlay district that does exist within the municipality. And we also assume that sewer and water is available, and we assume maximum yield on any lots that we have identified for development or redevelopment. In other words, looking at minimum lot sizes and maximum building coverages for those parcels. Next slide, EJ. This is just a slide that shows the various zoning districts that were in the transportation service area, outlined in the dark red. The vast majority is under some form of residential zoning district at the moment, but there are some areas within the administrative district, administrative and research district, as well as some small pockets of commercial zoning too. And next slide, EJ. This table here reflects the results of our build-out analysis. On the left-hand side, you will see the various zoning districts within the transportation service area, with residential at the top, and then the admin and research, industrial, limited industrial, and commercial below that. The next column over looks at areas that we identified for potential development and identifies either the maximum units in the residential areas or commercial building square footage in the commercial and other zoning districts. The next column over looks at areas that were identified for potential redevelopment within the municipality, again with residential units and square footage building footprints for the commercial and industrial and admin areas. The final column shows a total number of those residential units and commercial administrative research building square footage. So you can see that the analysis identified within development a total residential build-out of 194 units and around 930,000 square foot within the other zoning districts. While for redevelopment, the analysis identified an additional 70 residential units and around 420,000 square feet of building for a total of 264 residential units and about 1.3 million square feet of building square footage. Using the 2010 census data that identified the household size in Schuylkill Township to be 2.78, if we take that 264 residential units, that would equate to around 733 new residents. And if we just look at the development possibilities within the municipality of 194 units, that would equate to around 539 new residents in the township if we were to see all these parcels be developed under current zoning. Next slide, EJ. And so just finally, the last slide here shows the parcels that were identified in the municipality for redevelopment or development and where they reside in those various zoning districts throughout the municipality. Those parcels that have sort of the hatched lines identify as redevelopment areas, while those with the dots are identified as potential development. And then the underlying colors reflect the various zoning districts for the municipalities. So, yep, next slide, EJ. And so that concludes an overview of the land use assumptions report. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions or comments from members of the committee or members of the public.
So we'll start with any questions from the committee? Okay, no questions. I guess at this time we can take questions from the public. EJ?
I don't have, no one from the public has submitted any questions or comments at this point. I would note for the record that one of the committee members, Tom Coyne, is attending virtually, so he is on Zoom attending the meeting. So hello to Tom. But I have not received any comments or questions. Chad, would it be okay for them to call for a vote at this point?
Sure. If there's no questions or comments, the committee can move to taking a vote on making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for approval of the draft land use assumptions report.
Okay, so make a motion for a vote?
I can do it.
Okay.
We want to make a motion to vote, that we recommend approval of the land use assumptions report by the Schuylkill Township Supervisors. Did I say that right?
I think you did.
All right.
I'll second that recommendation.
Okay, all those in favor of the,
Aye.
Aye.
aye?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Do we gotta get one on the Zoom?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Mike. Tom, you can cast a vote on this. How do you vote for the recommendation to the aye? Just type it in. Tom Coyne votes aye. Thanks, Tom.
It's 5-0 vote. Okay.
Okay,
New way of doing business.
all right. So I guess that's it for the public,
Yeah.
public meeting portion of the meeting?
Includes it.
That's
Tom
all.
Worker. A+ job.
Hey, oh, well, you have to see the treasure. That's,
Thank you, absolutely.
yeah.
Do you prefer that or a 3-hour conditional
Well,
use hearing?
when I get home, with my wife, I'll be out here till 11:30, according to me.
He's had some late nights here.
No, well,
He's had some really early morning.
Early.
You know, 5 o'clock in the morning, you
We've
know,
had that one.
they hang on. Yeah, I could watch my car running out there, so. Thank you, John.
So, yeah. Okay, so the next step for the land use assumptions report is to take it to the Board of Supervisors in August for consideration and approval. Assuming that the board does vote favorably on the committee's recommendation, that would then take us into the roadway sufficiency analysis portion of the transportation impact fee study. So as we've discussed over our previous 3 meetings, under normal circumstances, we would have already started much of that effort and at a minimum been completing the existing conditions traffic analysis for the roadway sufficiency analysis. But in light of the fact that circumstances weren't normal, we couldn't go out and do traffic counts during the COVID-19 restrictions. So other than some preliminary field work, we have not been able to really start much of the roadway sufficiency analysis. We're hoping that current trends continue in terms of most COVID-19 restrictions being lifted and things turning back to the new normal, I guess you would call it, with most people returning back to work in an office or wherever their place of work may be, children returning back to in-person schooling. And so hopefully that continues and there's no setbacks between now and September, and assuming that there's not, We're hoping that we can get our traffic counts done in September after the school year starts. So all that can be taken into account. Could things change between now and then? Certainly they could. Hopefully they don't. Once we get into September, we'll start that work, and then at that point in time, we'll be ready to meet with the committee probably at the earliest in the October to November time frame. So we're going to be on a little bit of a condensed schedule now. The MPC provides us an 18-month window to complete all these studies and adopt the transportation impact fee ordinance. So that puts us roughly in the January time frame that we have to have everything wrapped up. If circumstances dictate that we can't do that, we could always start the clock again and start a new 18-month window in order to give us more time. Hopefully we don't have to resort to that, but we'll just see how things go over the next couple months. So at that time, we'll have another series of meetings, and I'm going to work with EJ over the next month or so to put together, since we are going to be completing the roadway sufficiency analysis and the capital improvements plan and adopting the ordinance in a rather condensed schedule. I'm going to work with EJ over the next month or so to come up with a schedule that we can circulate to the committee so you know what to expect over the next 5 months. So, any questions or anything? That's all we really have tonight. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. The Phoenixville Area School District does have a number of days off in September.
Right.
So I'm sorry, we're still online. I didn't realize that. I'm sorry, Chad, the Phoenixville Area School District still has a number of days off in September. So if you could check with their school calendar to make sure that you do your counts while school is in session.
We certainly will.
I just got a copy of the calendar.
Okay.
And the supervisors meet in August? And Chad, you talked about the roadway sufficiency analysis, and then you threw in there capital improvements. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is?
Sure. The roadway sufficiency analysis will go through a study of 3 traffic conditions, 1 existing, 1 future without the build-out analysis from the land use assumptions report. And the 3rd scenario is a future year that includes the build-out scenario that Rob developed. For each of those scenarios, we'll identify potential roadway improvements, mostly consisting of adding turning lanes at intersections, adding new traffic signals, modifying existing traffic signals. We'll identify improvements based on what's called a preferred level of service, sort of a standard on a grading scale similar to school, where you grade traffic operations based on a grading system. So we'll identify improvements based on the standard that's set for the study, and the roadway sufficiency analysis will then give an inventory of the improvements that are needed to meet the preferred level of service or operating condition for those 3 scenarios. After that, we do the capital improvements plan, which takes that list of improvements from the roadway sufficiency analysis and assigns costs to them, and then further identifies of those costs what can be funded with impact fees, what cannot, and then we'll come up with a total cost of improvements that can be funded with impact fees, divide that by the number of trips that are generated from the development and the build-out scenario, and that'll give you your per trip fee, peak hour trip fee that would be assessed in new development then.
Okay.
And then after the capital improvements plan, all that gets put into an ordinance and adopted by the Board of Supervisors going forward.
I don't know if this is a short answer or a long answer, but is there a simple answer to what determines what the impact fees can cover? Like, you said, there's an analysis of.
It's all dictated by the municipal planning code.
Okay,
So there's only certain types of improvements that are eligible to be funded with impact fees. Ones that add capacity to intersections. And then it goes further to say any improvements on state highways, only 50% of the project cost can be funded with impact fees.
Sure.
Which then creates a scenario where the township would then have to partner with PennDOT or identify other funding sources to come up with the other 50% in order to complete a project.
okay.
Are any of them prioritized? Do you prioritize your failing intersections?
You can. Most capital improvements, capital improvement plans don't prioritize them because one of the requirements of the capital improvements plan is that you have to create a schedule for when the improvements will be completed. And if the improvements aren't completed within 3 years of that date set in the capital improvements plan, technically, it never happens, but technically you're supposed to refund the impact fees that were collected to those who paid. So for that reason, the way the capital improvements plan is typically set up is nothing's prioritized and every project's identified as taking place in the last year of the capital improvements plan. So the municipality never finds themselves in a position where they have to refund fees.
Is there any consideration for the building around Schuylkill Township and how it will impact in the next year?
It will. We have to, the second scenario I talked about, which was the future without the build-out scenario from the township, it's often referred to as the future pass-through condition.
Uh-huh.
And basically, what that analyzes is traffic 10 years out that only takes into account natural growth in traffic that you would typically see on a year-to-year basis, regardless of what land development occurs. And that takes into account, we use what's referred to as a background growth rate. That takes into account just the natural increase in population and vehicle registrations and vehicle ownership. And those kind of rates are developed by PennDOT that we use in the studies. But it also takes into account growth in surrounding townships. And in that scenario, any improvements that are needed to mitigate traffic in that scenario, our projects then are not allowed to be funded with impact fees because they're necessitated by traffic conditions before development occurs. So as we get into the roadway sufficiency analysis, we'll go through all that in more detail about what those scenarios mean and what's included and what's not and what's eligible for impact fees and what's not.
So our role in October, you're going to bring a roadway sufficiency analysis to us. Is that right? Did I get that right? You're going to bring this.
At the earliest.
Okay. So you're going to bring that to us, we're going to evaluate it, we're going to understand it, and then
Correct.
if we agree with what you've done, then we're going to recommend approval by the supervisors?
Correct.
Okay. And then what else is this committee going to do between now and when the supervisors would be done with us?
Yeah, you'll make a recommendation on the roadway sufficiency analysis and the capital improvements plan as well.
Okay. So those
similar to what you did tonight.
Those both have to be approved by the supervisors?
Correct.
Okay. Is the ultimate ordinance that our township would come up with, is it just cookie cutter? Is it just something that Pennsylvania's already written and we just adopt it?
For the most part, there's a model ordinance that the state developed for municipalities to use. For the most part, it's cookie cutter. You just plug in the numbers and the dates and the roadways that are specific to Schuylkill Township.
The committee doesn't automatically dissolve after the ordinance is adopted though, right? To Mike's point, or do they?
No, it doesn't have to. Most townships, similar to any of the other township committees or commissions, will keep them in place to do periodic updates to the capital improvements plan and recommend, adjustments to the per trip impact fee. So most townships keep the committee that was used for the study together and reappoint them on an annual basis at their reorganization meeting. And that's what we would recommend that, Schuylkill Township does moving forward. But, over time you'll see, members, come and go from the committee.
So what's a periodic update? Is that like every 3 years, every 5 years, every?
It really varies by municipality, and there's different levels of updates that you can do. One is to account for regular increases in construction costs that occur over time due to inflation. And those can be done more frequent. Once you get out closer to the 10 years after the original study, the recommended approach is to go back and do what I'll call a major update, which is you would go back and look at land use again, redo the traffic studies to do more of an overhaul of the program. There's some municipalities though that let it go for long, 20 years and never do an update. So it just all depends on the municipality and how vigilant they are with keeping on top of it and doing periodic updates as they're necessary.
It occurs to me that there's like two factors right now with the timing of ours, and one is the census. So we got 10-year-old information right now, and the other one is just what is the traffic pattern really going to be in September of this year compared to September next year, let's say.
Right. Yeah, it's a situation we haven't had to encounter yet with doing an impact fee study. We're hoping soon that, and there's indications that, I guess for the last year and a half, PennDOT's had certain requirements on traffic data that's used in traffic studies for their highway occupancy permit process in terms of, you really couldn't go out and do traffic counts during the pandemic, and you had to do a series of things to try and adjust traffic volumes to get them as accurate as possible. We've heard indications that this fall they may allow for their highway occupancy permit process for traffic counts to resume, and that they would accept those counts for the most part. So we're hoping that that comes about this fall, just sort of as an extra, I guess, backup to what we do as part of this study in terms of decreasing the likelihood of somebody coming in later and challenging what we did. And to the extent possible, we'll be as conservative as we can to try and avoid a situation where somebody could potentially challenge the studies that are done for the township.
Okay. No more questions? All right, I guess we can adjourn the meeting.
Can you use the gavel?
I was going to say, can I
sit
go?
in the right seat?
Sit there next time. Thank you.